I'm Justin Mott and welcome to my home in Hanoi, Vietnam, and today we're gonna try a new series. This is my mailbag series. I've asked you guys on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook to ask me photography related questions. I had some great questions out there from all over the world, so we're gonna get right to it. I'm gonna answer my favorite questions of the week. Okay, my first question came from YouTube, from Lucas Lamont. Thank you for your question, Lucas. And the question was, what is the story behind you moving to Vietnam and how did you get settled there? So I'll start with my first trip to Vietnam. I came here in 2005 as a backpacker, not really like a backpacker in the traditional sense. I came here with my camera, some gear, and I traveled around Cambodia and Vietnam back into a workshop I did with Gary Knight and the 7 agencies. And then after that was a workshop about documentary photography. And at the end of that workshop, I spent a couple months traveling around Vietnam and Cambodia and fell in love with this area. I had about one more year of school left at San Francisco State University where I was studying journalism with a sequence in photojournalism, and I knew my career, I knew what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to work as a assignment photographer, as a documentary photographer and such. And when I did the workshop, Gary really kind of kicked my butt and it made me really realize like I was good in school, but I wasn't good as a photographer. I was really bad, and so I needed to work on my skills. So I spent a little time after that settling down in Hanoi, doing a couple projects, and then over the next year went back to school, but I found myself, I was really drawn to Vietnam. So before I could finish school, I was a little burnt out of school, a little burnt out of San Francisco, not burnt out of the San Francisco social life, but burnt out on what I was photographing in San Francisco. And I found myself so drawn to Vietnam, so passionate about wanting to go back there and work on these stories more. So I started doing a lot of research and I couldn't get out of my mind. I just kept wanting to come back here and work on stuff. So I realized, okay, that's what I should do. Even though I'd learned a lot in school, my professor was great, but I did feel like I was, all right, I'd learned what I needed to learn and it was time to sort of go out and get the education of the real world experience. So I had a little bit of money saved up, not a lot. Actually, I had no money saved up, to be honest. I had some debt because I bought some gear at the time. So I used that money, came out to Vietnam. Through the course of a year, I came back and forth, but I really got settled here. Decided I'm gonna make this work here in Vietnam. I like it here, I'm inspired to shoot here. Not just Vietnam, but the entire region was exciting to me. So I was working on different stories to sort of hone my craft, stories that I was really interested in, really passionate about. I did a story about victims of Agent Orange. That story really helped me craft my style of photography, my style of documentary photography and storytelling. That got me into the Eddie Adams workshop. When I went to Eddie Adams, I was networking and I was really pushing myself as a photographer in Southeast Asia. And I didn't know how it worked. Gave it a shot. Networked a few times in New York City, met with whatever editor would see me, put my work in front of them. Months later, I was getting work for the New York Times. Just sort of snowballed after that. And I never really looked back. And now 15 years later, still here making a career in commercial photography, documentary photography, and assignment photography. So a little bit of everything. So that's how I launched my career. Great question. That's the long version. The short version is fell in love with Vietnam, was inspired to shoot here, decided to make it work, and I did. The next question is by Jan Lester Bisco. I think that was from YouTube as well. Question is how to be creative during this pandemic. That's a great question. I've been inside the house for too long and my creative juices are already drained. It's a great question, Jan. The way that I dealt with the pandemic first was I was quite busy leading up to the pandemic. So, you know, if you were a busy photographer going into it, it was actually a nice break for me right at the beginning. Luckily here, by the way, in Vietnam, we haven't really been locked up. We've been free to kind of go around. The country's handled this in a fantastic way, and we were only locked up really for a short period of time compared to the rest of the world. And Vietnam, if you don't know, has only had 35 deaths and 1,500 cases. So I've been quite fortunate, quite lucky that the way that the government has handled and the way that people have handled this pandemic. I'm very, very fortunate compared to especially people in my home country, the United States. So the way I handled it at the beginning, so it's gonna be different for everyone, but the first step for me was, okay, all the stuff that I've been putting off for all these years traveling and working and back-to-back shoots, and I started to get into that. So everything I procrastinated on, going back through my website and doing an edit of my entire website, going through my archive, which I just did a vlog about that. Going back to my archive, looking at my work, self-evaluation. So I really used those first month to basically like go through the back end of my business, all the unsexy stuff, go through the back end of my business, go back through old photos, going through the website, going through marketing materials. I run different businesses. I have a studio photography business. I have my personal project, Kindred Guardians, and that was really getting a lot of momentum. I have a commercial photography and video production business. We do a lot in hotels and resorts. So there was a ton of stuff for me to do. I have entire staff to help out with. There's a lot of stuff that I needed to do hands-on. and I really got into that right away. So that was the first step. Now your question was how to stay creative. So after that, I looked into ways. We're all in this trap right now. After a month, I got really bored and I really missed shooting. I really missed what I love about photography. It's not the back end stuff, it's the creative part. So I did a self-portrait series, something I'd never done before, something outside of my comfort zone. And I did it about something that was interesting to me. So I put that up on my website as well. You can see, I'll put a link in the description, but I did a self-portrait series exploring my emotions, exploring my feelings about being an American living in Vietnam and sort of the difference between what it was like to live in Vietnam, a society that handled it so well, but looking at my country, the United States, and talking to my family there and seeing how horrible it's been handled. It was a self-expression series that allowed me to be creative. It allowed me to experiment with studio photography. In addition to that, I did a lot more with studio photography. During the time I launched the studio photography business, it forced me to experiment with my portrait photography, with my studio work, with lighting and things like that. So it's a great time to learn a new skill. And then another thing I did during that time is I worked on my editing. I learned new skills. I spent a lot of time on YouTube, not just doing these, but looking and researching and learning on YouTube. So I used this time to sharpen my skills in retouching. Spent a lot of time learning video editing. That was a big thing. I spent like 2 months just really diving in and getting better at video editing. But getting better at editing helped me become a better shooter for video as well. So that's how I stay productive. What I would suggest to you is do those things first that you've been putting off, those things that you need to do for your business, but you don't like to do them. Give yourself a project. You can go around your neighborhood and shoot. You can photograph yourself, whatever that is. Just like get your camera, find something to shoot, get out of your comfort zone, try something different. That would be my advice. Next question, also by Lucas. Lucas, you have great questions, so I figured I'd put another one up here. What are your future plans with Kindred Guardians project, and can the YouTube community do anything to make future projects a reality? It's very nice of you to offer that. Very nice question to ask. So as far as what the YouTube community can do to help is just the more you guys comment, the more that you ask questions, the more engaged, the more it makes me want to share stuff with you guys. I really enjoy that. If you guys have any great ideas for stories, that's also very helpful, even though there's nothing I could shoot right now. What does the future hold for Kindred Guardians? So far I've shot 6 different stories, and I've got a ton of stories lined up. I've got a great story. I don't want to give any of the stories away, but I've got great stories lined up all around the world. One of the stories I was about to fly off to, I was 24 hours to Austria to shoot the story, and then we're going to go to Bangladesh, and canceled because that's when COVID broke out about a year ago, well, a little bit over a year ago here in Vietnam. So I've got a lot of great stories lined up. I've been communicating with my subjects. I want to go back and visit the rhinos as well. That's another story that's part of Kindred Guardians, but it's also kind of become its own story. I really want to get in, because of COVID, because I've really launched this YouTube channel. And that's another way to stay creative, by the way. I launched this YouTube channel during COVID. But because of this YouTube channel, because I have this outlet now for my work, I really want to make sure I dedicate time, in addition to doing my photo stories for my project and creating this book that I want to create for Kindred Guardians, I also want to put together video episodes. And I want that to collectively feed into a documentary in the end. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm scripting ideas, how to make this one cohesive story that I can put on YouTube as a full documentary. Also put aside time for each chapter of Kindred Guardians to become its own episode. It's gonna be complicated. It's gonna be a little more money for me because I have to spend another couple days for each story, but I always figure I'm already there, I'll know the story well. So what I'm gonna do on the back end of each photo story, I'm gonna spend a couple days separate, because I don't like to do the two at the same time. I always feel like I lose a little bit from both and I never really get what I want. The point of the story is to slow down and not speed up and not be rushed. I'm gonna do a video episode for each chapter of Kindred Guardians moving forward, so that's what I'm looking forward to. That's the next chapter. As soon as the borders open, as soon as I can travel again. So great question. The next question was, oh, I didn't write down the name, sorry. I'm not gonna give you credit here, but the question was how to say no. I think I received that on Instagram, but I will credit later on. I apologize for that. How to say no? Great question though, because it's something I've struggled with throughout my entire career. In the beginning of my career, I rarely said no. Second shooter is a wedding, third shooter is a wedding, photograph events, photograph this story, photograph this assignment, anything. I was always like a big advocate of like, I just want to work, I want to earn. I love photography, so it wasn't hard for me to say no. What I say no to now, it's more of timing. If I've got a busy month and I can't shoot, but what I also did is when that started to happen, I expanded my business so I could have other photographers work or other cinematographers work for me, and so that I could keep these jobs in-house. Because I did do a pretty good job in marketing midway through my career, so I started to get a lot of work, and I was just kind of giving that work away, and I thought that was kind of unfair because I was hustling so hard, I was branding my work so much. I figured it's not fair for me to just always give this work away and not get anything in return, so I decided to expand and have other photographers shoot under my business and get a percentage and be transparent, and we both make money off of it, so I thought that was fair. So I would say no, things that I don't agree with ethically. I'm not gonna get into a big list of that, but I've said no to plenty of jobs that were great money that I just don't ethically believe in, and I value my time now, so I say no based on my schedule and what works well for my business going forward and what works well for me personally as a photographer and morally as a photographer. So I'm not a great person to ask how to say no. I don't say no that much, but I say no to jobs that I get red flags on right away. And for a job where I know people don't know that I'm the right fit for them, you know, if I know they really want like someone that does a ton of post-production and they want a certain style, my work's not like that, I'll say no and I'll refer someone else. If it's something I think I can adapt my style to, yes. I'm not that like snobby about my style, my work. I know I can adjust. I know my personal work is my personal work and I own it. I know commercial work, I can adjust. I like that challenge to adjust, so that's okay with me. But you know, if I think that a client's gonna be really a pain and I think that they're not used to working with photographers, they're not gonna work well with me based on like the way I like to work with clients, then yeah, I'll definitely say no to that. You know, they don't wanna pay a deposit for a shoot that I've gotta put a lot of money up front for a commercial shoot, then yeah, I don't wanna say no. So I say no to jobs like that all the time. The next question, this is a question I get asked a lot, and this is prime or zoom lenses. That's a great question as well. I have been a prime lens photographer since like 2006. I remember I rolled up at the workshop with Gary Knight in 2005. I had lenses out to here, and you know, I wasn't doing like wildlife stuff or sports, and he was just like, there's always one American with all this kit. And I realized, yeah, it was really weighing me down. Southeast Asia is very hot and humid, so carrying all that stuff really like weighed me down physically and mentally as well, because there's a lot to think about. So I actually went very light after that. I switched to a 35mm. I shot the first year of my career with a Canon 5D, the original 5D, and show you how old I am, and a Canon L series 35 1.4. I shot all my assignments with just that setup, and it made me a much better photographer. I love 35mm as a focal length. It just works well for me. You know, everyone's quite different, but prime lenses really worked well for me because it made me think more, it made me move more, it gave me less clutter. Like, okay, I wasn't thinking in the moment like, oh, what would this look like with the 7200? Then I take the 7200 out. What is it gonna look like at 70? What's gonna look like at 200? The way that I shoot, the kind of things that I shoot, my subject matter and my style really lent itself more to a 35, and the 35 actually made me create like the style that I use now. So that was also very helpful. So prime lenses for me all the way throughout my entire career. I very rarely use zoom lenses, but that just works for me. A lot of my stories are long form, so I've got time to think, I've got time to move, I've got time to anticipate, I've got time to tell the story in multiple pictures, so that's why it works for me. But you know, I understand zoom lenses work for some people in different situations. Even my wildlife stuff now, because it's wildlife photojournalism and documentary work, I'm following people around, so people still think it's crazy when I show up. They always doubt me when I show up, like, oh God, this guy's not serious. When I show up with my Leica and my 35mm and like, you know, a 50mm or a 70 or something like that, and that's it. It's like a small kit. You're photographing animals? Like, yeah, I do it my way. Next question is from James Dilday, a person I photographed on assignment for the New York Times a long time ago. James, thank you for your question. His question is when to use bokeh and when not to. I love how you handle this, but I don't understand. It's a great, honest question. I love questions like this. You know, bokeh with the autofocus and autofocus background, you have those nice, like, some people say bokeh, some people say bokeh. It's always a stupid, weird debate. I say bokeh. It's a complicated question. What I'll just answer it with is when to shoot like heavily autofocus. I'll break it down simple like this. You know, I shoot wide open, which is when you get that nice bokeh, you shoot at 1.4, or if you're don't have the luxury of having a fancy lens like that at 2.8, you'll still get that look, that autofocus, you know, bubbles in the background, whatever you want to call it. But I'll boil it down to just simple. I shoot wide open at 1.4 quite a bit, and I do it because I like the color rendition I get on a lot of lenses. I use a Leica Semilux 1.4 lens. I love what it looks like at 1.4. Still very sharp. And I like the sort of look that it gets around. I like the color that I get from it, and I like that it really makes my subject pop. Whatever I'm focused on really pops really nicely, so it has that nice 3D look that I'm going for. It shouldn't rely on it. A lot of people rely on shooting wide open as just like a gimmick. I do it for a reason. I do it when I'm trying to isolate my subject from the background. I have a busy background that I can't move around, I can't adjust, but the eye just to go to my subject. So it's not a very sexy answer, but that's just how I use it, you know. But it's very easy to get caught in that trap to just shoot wide open all the time. Think about it. Sometimes when you want to show those layers, you want to show what's in the background or in the foreground, or if you don't want what's in the foreground to be like a big blob, you shoot at 1.4 and it's really out of focus, it can be distracting. So really have a thought process, slow down and think, why am I shooting at 1.4 or why am I shooting at like f16? Are you trying to get these layers in focus so people can look around your picture, or do you want the person's eye when they're looking at photograph to go right to the subject? You want them to pop. Every situation is different. There's no rhyme or there's no exact rule, but that's just a general idea of when I shoot wide open and when I don't. So that's it for the mailbag section, guys, today. I appreciate it. This is the first episode. Great questions you guys had. There was more questions like that. Sorry I didn't get to them. If you ask them in the comment section here, I will do my best to get to them either next week or back in the comment section. So ask me more for next week. I want to make this a weekly series. Maybe I'll keep it filming in my home office here, so we have a little change of atmosphere. So thank you guys, I appreciate it. Thank you for all these wonderful questions. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Take it easy.